Ever been laughed at for dreaming too big? Picture this. You're a kid in class. The teacher goes around asking everyone what they want to be when they grow up. Some say firefighters, others say doctors. Then it's your turn and you say, "I want to be on TV." The whole class laughs. That kid? His name was Steve Harvey, and what they didn't know is that one day they'd all see him on their TV every single day. But the road from being laughed at to becoming a household name wasn't a straight line. It was a story filled with stuttering, homelessness, heartbreak, and an unbreakable dream. Steve Harvey was born in 1957 in Welch, West Virginia, a coal mining town that didn't offer much in the way of dreams, especially not for a poor black kid with a speech impediment. He was the youngest of 5 children, and his family didn't have much. His father was a coal miner who brought home barely enough to keep the lights on. To make things harder, Steve had a severe stutter, so bad in fact that even saying his own name out loud was a struggle. Speaking was a source of shame, and kids often made fun of him. But Steve? He didn't let it break him. He once said, "God ain't through with me yet." And even back then, that faith kept him going. Even when everyone around him thought his dreams were ridiculous, Steve held on to one thing. He wanted to be on television. And even though he didn't know how, he just kept believing that someday, somehow, it would happen. Success always has a backstory, and Steve Harvey's is built on grit, rejection, and a painful kind of loneliness that few would survive. After discovering his gift for comedy in the late 1980s, Steve made the bold decision to chase it full-time. But chasing dreams doesn't come with a roadmap, and definitely not a paycheck. In those early days, gigs were rare, the money was worse than minimum wage, and each show felt like a gamble. Either he crushed it and got invited back, or he bombed and went home broke. And home, at one point, wasn't even a home. When the calls dried up and the money ran out, Steve found himself without a roof over his head. For 3 long years, he lived out of his 1976 Ford Tempo. That wasn't a temporary setback, it was a lifestyle. He kept his belongings in trash bags. He used coolers filled with ice to store lunch meat. He bathed in hotel bathrooms, truck stops, or gas station sinks, doing whatever it took to stay clean enough to walk on stage like everything was fine. Sometimes he didn't eat. Sometimes he didn't sleep. But one thing never changed. He didn't quit. At one point, Steve had a gig in Florida, but didn't have enough gas money to get there. A friend wired him $50, just enough to make the trip. He nailed the performance. That show led to another, then another, and eventually it led to a spot on Showtime at the Apollo. That $50 investment? It turned into a career. But what's easy to forget is how close he came to quitting, multiple times. Steve often tells the story of sitting alone in his car, crying, asking God why the dream wasn't working. Why keep going when nothing's going right? Why keep believing when everything around you says it's over? The answer was always the same. Because you still believe. And in a world that didn't see him, that didn't care if he failed, Steve chose to believe anyway. He could have gone back to a 9-to-5, he could have settled. But every time he thought about quitting, he remembered the teacher who laughed when he said he wanted to be on TV. And he remembered that little boy who never stopped dreaming. That boy still had a shot, and Steve wasn't going to let him down. It wasn't one of those magical Hollywood moments where the music swells and the lights go up. No, Steve Harvey's turning point arrived quietly, wrapped in exhaustion, desperation, and one final shot at making it. It was 1993. Steve was broke, nearly out of hope, and still living out of his car. He'd been bouncing between small-time gigs and comedy clubs, sometimes performing for just enough money to buy a cheeseburger. He was tired, not just physically, but spiritually worn down. Then came a call that would change his life. A spot had opened up on Showtime at the Apollo. A comedian had dropped out. They needed a last-minute replacement. The only catch? Steve had just $35 to his name, and the gig was in New York, hundreds of miles away. He had to choose. Stay where it was safe, or gamble it all, one more time. So, he bet on himself. He scraped together enough money for the flight and showed up in Harlem with nothing but a suit and the kind of pressure that could crush most people. This wasn't just another show. This was the Apollo, legendary, electric, and absolutely unforgiving. And then Steve walked on stage. At first, the crowd was quiet, skeptical. But then he started speaking and something shifted. His timing? Perfect. His delivery? Effortless. His stories? Raw, hilarious, and real. He didn't just perform. He connected. He made them laugh, not just because he was funny, but because he was honest, because they'd felt that kind of pain too. The audience erupted. That night, Steve Harvey didn't just kill the set, he announced his arrival. And producers noticed. That single performance opened the door to recurring appearances, comedy tours, and eventually his own sitcom, The Steve Harvey Show. But more than the gigs, it gave him something far more valuable: validation. Proof that all those nights in his car, all those rejections, all that ridicule, had led him here. He wasn't a dreamer anymore. He was a rising star. But what Steve didn't know yet was that the spotlight was just beginning to heat up. While Steve Harvey's star was rising on stage and on screen, his personal life was unraveling behind the scenes, slowly, painfully, and far away from the public spotlight. For many, success silences pain, but for Steve, it amplified it. His first marriage, to Marcia Harvey, collapsed under the weight of conflicting lives. One built on responsibility, and another chasing fame. As Steve began spending more time on the road, chasing gigs and building his career, the distance from his family widened. Their relationship ended, but not without consequences. The divorce created a chasm between Steve and his children, one that would take years of effort and humility to repair. Then came his second marriage, to Mary Shackelford, a union that brought even more turmoil. What started with promise ended in a legal and emotional minefield. The breakup was brutal and public. Accusations flew, headlines followed, and the stress nearly undid everything he'd built. At one point, Steve found himself in a financial and emotional freefall. He lost millions. Not just money, momentum. Behind the laughter and million-dollar smile, he was dealing with depression, custody battles, and a deeply fractured identity. Fans saw the entertainer, the sharp suits, the humor, the timing. But off-camera, he was struggling to keep his footing in a life that felt like it was slipping away. And yet, Steve never let bitterness take root. He could have walked away. Many would have. But he stayed in the ring. He once said, "Failure is a great teacher, and I think when you make mistakes and you recover from them, you're stronger." That's exactly what he did. Not just once, but repeatedly. Steve Harvey's personal battles weren't side notes in his story. They were the fuel behind the man he would become. Every loss carved out space for growth. Every betrayal sharpened his discernment. And every setback was quietly building the foundation for one of the greatest comebacks in entertainment history. Steve Harvey today is a man who wears many suits, and not just the custom-tailored ones he's famous for. He's a host, an entrepreneur, a mentor, a father, a husband, a philanthropist, and above all, a man of faith and structure. He didn't just climb the ladder of success, he built the rungs himself and now teaches others how to do the same. Behind the camera and away from the spotlight, Harvey is obsessed with one word: discipline. He wakes up at 4:30 a.m. every single day, not because he has to, but because he's wired for purpose. He's often said, "You can't sleep 8 hours and expect to be great." That's not a motivational poster. That's how he lives. His days are calculated, intentional. He believes that structure is the only way to turn a dream into a deliverable. But it's not just about hustle. It's about legacy. Through his Steve and Marjorie Harvey Foundation, he has poured millions into mentorship programs, college scholarships, and initiatives aimed at uplifting underprivileged youth. He's especially passionate about helping young Black boys understand their worth, navigate manhood, and break cycles of poverty. Why? Because he was that kid. He knows what it's like to feel unseen, and what's remarkable is that for someone who has it all, the fame, the fortune, the accolades, Steve Harvey is still deeply grateful. Not in a performative, camera-ready way, but in a grounded, spiritual sense. He often gets emotional talking about how far he's come. You can see it in his eyes. This isn't someone who takes his blessings lightly. He knows he was close to giving up, close to giving in, but he didn't. And now, every morning he opens his eyes, he treats it like a second chance, not just to succeed, but to serve. And that is the real success. It's not about being born into the perfect situation. It's not about avoiding failure. It's about pushing forward even when life seems impossible. It's about holding on when no one else believes in you. And it's about trusting that your dream is valid, even when you're sleeping in the backseat of a car. Steve Harvey didn't just chase his dream, he caught it, wrestled with it, and turned it into a life beyond what even he could imagine. And if he can do it, with a stutter, no money, no safety net, why not you? Don't let where you are stop you from getting where you're meant to be. If you felt something from this story, do me a favor. Hit that like button, subscribe, and check out the links in the description for more inspiring journeys. And if you know someone who needs a reminder that they're not done yet, share this video with them. Steve Harvey believed in the impossible and made it his reality. You can too.